afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday, June the 9th. This is the Made in Paradise podcast coming to you from Costa Rica. My name is John Clark, along with my co-hosts Darren and Anthony. And we talk about life and big closeout deals every day, Monday through Friday. Today, I want to start out by talking about a lesson that my mentor taught me. My mentor's name was Brooks, and in southern Louisiana, a little town called Shoe Peak, which is south of Sulphur, Louisiana, about 40 miles off of the coast in Louisiana. He had a place there called the Shepherd's Rest, and it was like a big family-friendly park. So there was no, obviously, alcohol or drugs allowed out there. They had a huge man-made lake and a swimming hole and places to play sports and pavilion and all kinds of things. And you could just go out there with your family and enjoy it. And he had a donation box. And so he just left the donation box. Didn't cost you anything. If you didn't have any money to pay, you could still come and enjoy it. Just had to follow the rules of keeping it family friendly. And so one of the things he had to do is he had a whole lot of grass to mow during the summertime there to keep it all going. And he had a riding lawnmower. And so one Sunday afternoon in February, when it was still cold in Louisiana, he was sitting in his living room watching the Dallas Cowboy football game. And this is not too far before the Super Bowl, so it's pretty exciting. And he's on Sunday afternoon, and here he is watching the game on February, and he doesn't have to start cutting grass until April. But while he's sitting there watching the game, his mind started to say, you know what? Every time you got to cut that grass, that lawnmower is a problem. There's always some problem you got to go with that lawnmower. Maybe this year you ought to get ready ahead of time. And he said, I sat there trying to enjoy the game, and the lawnmower just keep coming in my mind until finally I got irritated, got up out of my chair, went outside to the shed where the lawnmower was, and proceeded to try to start it, and it wouldn't start. And he said, I sat out there for hours. He said, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and just whipped myself into a froth. I was so angry about this lawnmower and the fact that it wouldn't start. He said, I'm sitting there and I'm greasy and I have tools all over the floor. And he said, John, right there in that moment, God spoke to me and said, Brooks, it's not time for the lawnmower to start. Go enjoy the football game. What are you doing? And so he said, in that moment, I listened to that voice. I picked all the tools up. I washed my hands, and I went down and sat down for the football game and watched the rest of it, and never thought again about that lawnmower until April, when it was time to cut the grass. And he said, at that time in April, a little over 2 months later, I walked out to the shed, stuck the key in the lawnmower, and cranked it, and it turned over the very first time. It just started perfectly. And he said, John, God taught me in that moment to respect God's timing, because so often we're trying to manifest something in our life, or we're praying for something in our life, and we're anxious about it. And anxiousness is the opposite of manifestation. Manifestation, the law of assumption, the law of attraction, that all works off of being relaxed. So if you're worried and you're stressed and you're anxious about whatever situation, you're actually pushing it away, because what do you attract when you're acting or thinking anxiously? You're attracting more situations to make you anxious. And so as life went on, as he mentored me over the course of 25 years, when he found me being impatient, because he sat very often in my office and he supervised me, listened to my phone calls and critique with my relationships and the decisions that I would make. And when he would see me become impatient when I was in my 20s and 30s, he would see me become impatient, and he'd just sit back in the chair and he'd say, John, it's not time for the lawnmower to start. And all he had to say was that about the lawnmower. And I realized in that moment I was being impatient every time he did it. So for a lot of people out there who are listening to this, they got something in their life that they would love to manifest, a situation that they would love to change, something that they want to accomplish. And I want to say it's not here now. It's not time for the lawnmower to start, but the lawnmower will start if you won't be anxious.
I think the issue with many people is that they have a dream or they have a wish and they want it to become real immediately, right? They have a goal and they visualize it, or they ask their God, I need this or I want this, but they want it to be right there, right? In the next minute. And whenever there's 1 day or 2 days, they get anxious, right? It didn't work. It's not working. God not listening to me. And that's the
And it never will. And it never will. It never will. The state that brings manifestation is relaxed and calm. When something really good happens, and you guys know this because we've done so many big deals and been involved in so many big things, when it happens, it's not a moment where everybody gets up and yells and that's not what happens. It just shows up in a moment and you go, oh, look at what's just happened. Look at what's just happened.
Right. We could compare manifestation with a woman being pregnant, right? We know that she's pregnant, but you won't see the baby probably until 9 months, right?
Right.
You know that it's coming, right?
Right.
But you can't see it yet. So
I think it's better compared to a seed, because anyone who's planted anything, you don't plant the seed and then 2 days later go dig it up and say, is it hatched yet? Is it opening up yet? Is it germinating yet? Of course not. Of course not. Only an idiot would do that. You have to put it in the ground and wait a long time, depending on what that organism is.
Right. And by the way, before you decide waiting a long time, you got to make sure that you give it some water and whatever it needs, right? So the water in this scenario would be you're thinking over and over in your dream, right?
Right. Your continued relaxed thought. Your continued thought of living in the end in a relaxed fashion. Right? If you're trying to attract money and you're anxious about money, you're going to get none. Right? Because the person who has money is not anxious. They're relaxed and secure in that way. Go ahead, Darren.
Well, I was going to say I had a pretty funny. You brought up the seeds, and I actually was trying to consider myself a bit of a green thumb. I had some pineapple seeds that I wanted to plant, but I needed to germinate them first. If anyone knows anything about germinating seeds, you put them in a paper towel, a moist paper towel, and you let it sit in the dark. Well, I threw them out after 3 days thinking, oh, they didn't pop. And then someone came in and was like, why'd you do that? It takes 7. I just had no idea.
Right. But having done this over and over and over, I'm telling you, I got an idea. And it comes in the calm, right? The manifestation always comes in the calm.
Right. By the way, I remember the first time I got my car, back in the time, I remember very good. We have all these small containers to put in the seed. So you could the lemon or the orange, whatever. So we have all these at home. And what I did is I wrote on a paper, I write my car, and I put it inside there in one of all the other ones. So every morning when I used to pour some water, I even pour some water in the container that had the notice that said my car, right? And in the time I forget that it wasn't a seed, right? Because in the following days you remember, oh, that's just a notice, right? But whenever you can continually pouring water in all the other containers, you completely forget that that's not a seed, right? And finally I got my car. But I made a mistake, and I learned with John, I made a mistake. I wasn't that detailed, right? I didn't have full detail how I want my car to be. I just said, I have my new car or my car. But I finally got a car, right? Using that technique.
Not the car that you specifically wanted, but it's the car that you got.
Well, but see, I always say you don't want a car. You want a car for a reason, and it's the reason that you need to focus on, not the car. Right. So if you want reliable transportation, you need to focus on that. If you want a chick magnet, you need to focus on that. Right. If you want to go fast, you need to focus on that. But the car itself, it's always more challenging to manifest something specifically than it is to manifest the feeling of what you want.
It's like the genie, you rub the base and the genie comes out and you're like, I want a chick magnet, and it gives you a magnet that literally pulls in chickens.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Need to be talking about really what you want. All right. Anthony Ferguson, what do you have for us today?
Let me ask you, John, would you rather live without internet or without electricity?
Without the internet, for sure. I can
Yeah.
live. I can completely live without the internet. I dream of the day that I give my phone away to one of you, and if you want to get me, you have to text you first, and then you can come tell me if I need to talk about it.
Right.
I every day I spend about an hour in meditation, and so I've started having some days where I spend sometimes 2 or 3 hours in meditation, and my wife sometimes like, how do you do that? Right? Because, you have to sit as still as possible or whatever. But having been in front of monitors my entire life, I'm just fine to be without them. Sometimes I just crave to have no input. Just, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to talk about anything.
So,
And it's always nice to be able to turn on the lights when it's dark. And then it's
Right.
just seeing where you're
Yeah.
walking is.
Yeah, or cook food on an electric stove or microwave or
Right.
whatever else. But the internet, I mean, besides business, I'm really not using that many various pages, right? So used to be Google, now it's the AI.
So, and then, what invention do you think has had the greatest impact on humanity so far?
The first thing that came to mind was the printing press, because I think that books and the written word and the way we transmit information that way and the way information builds on other information, I think has been fabulous for humanity. I know that there's more information that can be accessed on the internet, but you have to take the good with the bad. So I'll go with printing press.
Okay. What invention do you think people take for granted these days?
I think modern medicine, because you hear a lot of people talking about, do your own research and don't trust the science and all of that stuff. And if you get bit by a dog with rabies and you go down to the clinic and they say, here, we need to give you this vaccine, and you're an anti-vaxxer, you're about to die. And so there's a lot of people screaming about, oh, science is not this, the science is not this. Well, I'm just curious what they're like when they get to the hospital and the doctor says, you want this antibiotic or you want to go?
Right.
And of course, we hear about those people that, for their religious beliefs, they won't allow their children to be looked at by modern medicine. And I think that's very foolish. And I think people take for granted what we have in our modern science and medicine. The distrust of it is unfounded.
Right. So, if one of the most important inventions had never existed, how different would be the world?
Everything would be completely different. And if you think about that, like the butterfly effect we were talking about yesterday, the slightest change in society or the world will change everything dramatically. It'll diverge, because just think about a straight line and you're going this way, and the slightest divergence, when it starts like that, as time goes, it just becomes an enormous gap, right? Just slight divergence. So yeah, any change in our development would be completely. I mean, what if we had, for example, developed solar power and wind power before fossil fuel? I mean, that would dramatically change society, humans, evolution, everything.
Right. So, what invention has most improved people's quality of life, from your point of view?
I'll go back to modern medicine and science.
Okay.
I think the advancements in science and math have been the things that improve people's quality of life more than anything else.
So which invention do you think has caused the most harm despite its benefits?
I'll go with the cell phone and the access to unlimited negative information.
So if you could witness the creation of any invention in history, which one would you choose?
I think there's this movie with Ricky Gervais in it called The Invention of Lying.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of my favorite movies, and I've watched it multiple times. And it's a society where no one lies. Everyone tells the truth about everything all the time. And as a girl he's interested in, Jennifer Garner, the actress that plays it, she's gorgeous, right? and they go out on a date together. And during the date, right, I mean, he's really enamored with her, and she looks over at him and she goes, "You're such a nice person, but I just can't imagine having your children and they end up looking like you." So anyway, his mother's dying in the hospital, and he's talking to her, and he just starts telling her a lie about heaven, and she hears it, and then she starts to believe it because no one lies, right? So everything everyone says, everyone believes it immediately. Then the nurses overhear him saying it, and then they start telling other people, and then a big crowd gathers. It's hilarious, but I think if people were forced to tell the truth all the time, if we just wearing a lie detector, just imagine, because the AI will be able to do it soon, right? It'll detect the inflection in your voice. It'll do so much a better job as a lie detector, and everybody will have one. And so when you lie, it'll beep and it'll go off. And I'm really looking forward to that time when we either decide we're not going to have those so we can keep lying, or we're going to have a truth detector with everybody all the time.
Right. So let me get to my last question for you, John. If you could invent something that would change the world, what would it be?
You know, with Baba Neem Karoli, and I've studied him so deeply, my guru, because I thought I might write a book. And Steve Jobs and Julia Roberts and Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of other famous people were influenced by him. And I thought for a while that him influencing those tech people might be some kind of a plan to transmit a message of love around the world at one time. Because if you think of transmit a message to everyone in the world at one time, what would that message be? And I would say if I could invent anything, Anthony, it would be that something that I could send the message of love to the whole people around the planet so that our species would have a much better chance of survival. Darren Bingleton, happy Tuesday. What do you got for the crowd at home?
Well, mine's a little light and hearty. I mean, my first question, it could be for either of you, but I think I would rather start with Anthony. I wanted to ask Anthony, have you ever spent money trying to impress someone and it completely backfired on you?
If I ever spent money trying to impress someone, I'm pretty sure, yeah, when I was a teenager, my girlfriend probably, right?
And how did that backfire on you?
Yeah, the thing is that now when I used to work with my dad on weekend, like all my other schoolmates, they used to have vacation and all that. They used to go with their parents to different countries or whatever. So I used to stay with my dad and work, right, in construction. So he used to pay me well. So on Monday, I used to go and brag to my classmate and say, "Hey, I have money. You went to vacation, I have money." So then I start walking around and investing in my girlfriend. And I used to give her money, and she used to give her boyfriend my money. Right. And I would
call that a definite backfire. Good explanation. That's wonderful.
What about you, John? Anything?
Well, I thought about the same thing. I mean, all the money that you invested the various women over the years, and then because I grew up when people were still old fashioned. I mean, now, we were in a restaurant about 3 days ago. We're sitting there, and Adri and I always sit side by side, right? So we sit side by side. A lot of times we're in a Tico Costa Rican restaurant with nothing but Ticos. We go in a lot of restaurants that gringos just don't go in. And we were in Soberanos the other day, and you've been in there with me, and it's not a very spacious restaurant. And we're sitting in the booth, and there's a couple right next to us, right? And Adri, of course, is eavesdropping on their entire conversation. They're eavesdropping on our conversation. And when they get up to leave, and the guy stands up, and he's just got to be like, he's not 2 meters in front of us, right? Standing right there about to pay the bill. And the waitress says, "Together?" And he says, "Oh, no, separate. I'm just paying for mine." And I thought Adri was going to be the most offended she'd been in months. She's like, people these days, right? Anyway, that's what it made me think of. So, what else you got? Tell us what else we got.
Anthony, what's the most expensive lesson money has ever taught you? Not business wise, but just in life in general.
Wow, I would say save money, because I would say I had this experience where sometimes you have this amount of money, so you feel comfortable, which is okay because we're using a law of attraction. You're gonna feel comfortable to continue attracting all this. But the issue is that I wasn't calculating that at the end of the month, so all these bills, right? So I had part I was paying rent back in the time, and my wife said to me, "Tomorrow we're gonna pay rent," and I had not even the half of the money. So have that feelings that finally they
Oh,
push you out,
yeah,
and
yeah.
finally we talked to the lady, and she was kind and nice, but I said, "Oh shit, no, that wasn't a good
But the
idea."
imagining, the imagining of it, the imagining of being put out is
Right,
almost as bad as the actually being put out, right?
right, exactly,
Except when you're
exactly.
worried, you think about it, you feel real bad, and then you think about something else, and you think about it again, you feel real bad again. Most of the suffering we go through is in our own mind, right? So
Agreed.
my answer to that question is when Brooks was dying of cancer, so he's got throat cancer, my mentor, and he's going to die. We know he's going to die. He's living in Louisiana, and me and my wife and his son, we were both residing in Dallas. So he decides he's going to make his very last trip away from home. After this, he's not going to travel anymore. Very last trip, he's going to come to Dallas, going to stay with me, visit with his son, visit with us both. And when he comes there, I said, okay, Dad, Brooks, I'm going to take you out for one more fantastic dinner anywhere you want to go. He chose a Brazilian steakhouse where they bring the meat out on the spit and cut it for you at your table. He chose that. And I went to a place that knew me very well. We got the best table in the place, and the manager was there, and they treated us fantastically. And we had each, me and my wife, prepared some questions that we wanted to ask, right? Because if you know someone's going to die, you just say, okay, do I know everything I need to know from this person? We prepared some questions. And one of my questions for my mentor was at that dinner, and never forget his answer. I said, Brooks, and let me say this before I say it. He lived most of his life with that property on donations with a donation box, like I said. So people donated him money, and he took what he needed to live, and he gave all the rest of it away. So at that dinner, big, nice, fancy, expensive dinner, I said, Brooks, what is the one thing in your life that you would credit with keeping you having such a young mind, even as your body has gotten older? And he never even blinked, and he said, we never had a budget. If we had money, we spent it, and if we didn't, we didn't. But he said, I would never worry about a budget. And he said, that's what kept me young.
Wow.
How about that?
That's great advice. I mean, I tried doing that myself when I was here in 21, and I always ended up, John, this is when we met, my truck used to always break down, and it would either be pay for the truck and have wheels to be able to get around in, or you got food. And so I'd always get myself into that position, that one position where it's like, all right, it's these two options.
And I've made budgets my whole life, and I've run companies, and you got to make a budget and all of that. But I'm just saying, he didn't let money worry was the thing. That was the real message. He didn't allow money worry to take years off his life, and it does take years off most people's life.
Yeah.
All right, Darren, you got anything else for us? We're at the 23-minute, 45-second mark.
I got another question for you, John, and I think I want you to answer this first because I know how you are. When you buy something, you like to buy the best of the best, because why would you buy something cheap and it break on you later on? So is there something you were too cheap about that ended up costing you more in the long run?
Man, my parents growing up and my brothers, everybody just ran it about, you got to buy an American car. Don't you dare buy a Japanese car. Because in the 70s and 80s, when I'm growing up as a kid, we're only thinking about it, right? We're only 30 something years, 40 years past World War II, and everybody's still mad at Japan. Of course, then we went over there and rebuilt it too, right? We paid war reparations to rebuild Japan and help rebuild Germany and a lot of other places. But they would just go on and on about American cars. And so up until I was in my 30s, I never bought any Japanese cars, and that was crazy. Toyota. There you go.
Yep. What about you, Anthony?
Wow, I had experience really sad because I wasn't that cheap in the beginning. The thing is that we used to use Nike, is this tennis shoes Nike, right? So in December, we used to go all the way to San Jose, where there was this activity, the light festival. There's all these lights and all
Yeah.
in San Jose. So we used to try to get like our best outfit, right? So we used to buy the tennis shoes. Nike used to cost like $60 back in the time. So my cousin tell me, hey, but in the street in Le Mans, there's this guy sitting in the street, and you know what the tennis costs? What it is? It costs like $20. It's the same thing. You cannot distinguish if it's original or not. So I'm saying, why do we need an original tennis, right? Don't need, right? If you say Nike, who we distinguish, right? And we went to the
Okay,
mall.
let's be honest now about it. When you go buy a nice set of tennis shoes, there's a whole lot of technology in that support system underneath.
Yeah,
It's not
definitely.
just. I mean, what you're buying in Le Mans for $20, it looks like the real thing, but the support system underneath, you're getting no technology. You're just getting the cheapest pair of rubber under there. So, number one, they're going to wear out a lot faster. That's number one. Number two, they might have chemicals in there that would harm you, including stuff that might cause cancer. And we may have lost Anthony now. Number three,
So.
number three, they may not feel those are the same on the inside. So, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's time to talk.
Story.
I think it's time to talk
I'll
about
tell them.
deals, and we're gonna remove Anthony here so we can go on to the end. Hopefully, he'll come back and join us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Made in Paradise podcast. We do this every Monday through Friday. Try to do it in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon. And we are sponsored by Proven Performer. That's our company. The three of us work together. We sell big closeout deals. We have new deals every single day. We would love to talk to you. We sell to 500 customers in 26 countries. If you have a deal you need to sell, please reach out and talk to us. The first deal I want to talk about today is Infamil. If you know about baby formula, it's always in high demand. We only have 3 pallets of this left, 1,728 cans, retail at $39.95. These are on 3 pallets. Retail $39.95, 1,728 cans. Your cost $8.50, $8.50. Reach out to us by WhatsApp or email at the numbers below. We'll be happy to show you this Infamil. X-Works, Houston, Texas. The other deal we want to talk to you about today is, Darren, is this Koya? Is that how we pronounce this? Koya Kids Infant Drink. This is a deal that has to be sold in Canada. Cannot come to the United States, can't go anywhere else, has to be sold in Canada. We have a total of 396,000 of these units at 20 cents a piece. 122 pallets, actually 22,000 cases. Very open to offers. Koya Kids Infant Fruity Cereal Flavored Drinks. 110 calories. They're 237 milliliter. On 122 pallets, FOB Ontario. Reach out to us about this deal, but it has to stay in Canada. We'd love to talk to you about either one of those. For myself and my co-hosts Darren Vingleton and Anthony Ferguson, this has been the Made in Paradise podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.